All right, thank you. My name is Mike Kijewski. I'm one of the co-founders of MedCrypt. Let's see. Nice, very good. So in 2014, I was a product manager at a medical device company talking to an administrator from a hospital, and I will attempt to tell this story in a HIPAA-compliant fashion. This administrator was concerned about a nation state using a cybersecurity vulnerability in a medical device in an attempt to assassinate a foreign dignitary that was a current patient. And I said, there's no way that's possible. That's BS. This is ridiculous. And then I started to research the field of medical device cybersecurity and learned that, at least at the time, few, if any, medical devices had any cybersecurity features built in, because the medical device vendors, when they were building these products, thought, who's ever going to hack a medical device? That's ridiculous, right? So we don't know if any hackers have actually physically harmed a patient using a cybersecurity vulnerability, because these devices haven't been designed to detect intrusion yet. But what we do know is that medical device vendors have spent more than hundreds of millions of dollars dealing with cybersecurity issues in the last 5 years, and this is about to get a lot more expensive for them in the coming years. So the first is the FDA released guidance documents last year asking medical device vendors to bake cybersecurity features into the design of devices. This is something that is difficult for them to do. It is not their core competency. And while cybersecurity vulnerabilities in medical devices have been reported as early as 2008, the number of cybersecurity alerts around medical devices has increased exponentially over the last 6 months. In fact, even the last 3 months, it's been sort of crazy in this area. So a typical connected medical device will send data back and forth between itself and a clinical information system using some network protocol like Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. And one of the problems becomes when there is a vulnerability in that communication protocol, all of that data is out there in the clear, and a hacker can either capture that data to do something bad financially with it, or they can manipulate the data to make the device do something it shouldn't. So one of the best ways to protect the data that these devices use is through the use of cryptography, things like encryption and signature verification. And medical device vendors could theoretically implement all of that on their own, but it's a very time-consuming process. It's complicated. It's not a medical device vendor's core competency, and it's really easy to get wrong. So MedCrypt makes it possible for a medical device vendor to secure their devices with a couple of lines of code. In this particular example, the instructions being sent to a CT scanner are being protected with encryption and signature verification and other things using 5 lines of code. One of the biggest challenges that medical device vendors face on the cybersecurity front is their inability to patch their software in a timely fashion. So recently, a medical device vendor announced a vulnerability in one of their products, and they assured their customers that the software would be patched quickly. It turns out that quickly meant 9 months, and the medical device industry thought that this was a good turnaround time. And I feel pretty strongly that if you can make a new human faster than you can go and patch your software, there's something wrong with your software development process. One of the benefits of MedCrypt is that you can patch many security vulnerabilities just by fixing the MedCrypt layer and incrementing MedCrypt from version 1.1 to 1.2 without touching any of the business logic of the medical device, which decreases the testing requirements and makes it possible to release a patch in a couple of days instead of 9 months. Finally, when MedCrypt is baked into a medical device, that device starts sending us usage data so we can look for anomalous behavior and proactively alert a medical device vendor to the fact that one of their devices is currently under attack. And by the way, that feature is something that the FDA has been asking medical device vendors to do. And to date, no medical device vendor has successfully done it internally. Estimates for the size of the medical device cybersecurity market currently range between 800 million and 2 billion. It's projected to exceed 10 billion in 2022. And while our current focus is medical devices, we see an opportunity to be the de facto cybersecurity technology in all of healthcare. This is obviously a very large market that has niche product requirements that are not being currently met by enterprise network security companies. Our founding team has backgrounds in medical device development, software development, and cryptography, and we have previously founded and sold a healthcare IT company successfully. Our advisory board includes a chief information security officer from a major medical device company, as well as a CISO from a major health network. Lots of cybersecurity experts feel that it's inevitable that we will see a patient die as a result of a cybersecurity vulnerability in a medical device, and at MedCrypt, we're working to prove them wrong. Thanks.
Oh, goodness. I have lots of questions. I guess the first question would be, how does FDA feel about this? Because a lot of times if you change anything on a medical device, FDA isn't really happy.
So the FDA actually has the opposite opinion about that when it comes to cybersecurity. In fact, they've put out many documents that say, if you are updating your software specifically to address a cybersecurity vulnerability, you do not need to resubmit. And medical device vendors are using this perception that the FDA requires this long reapplication process if you update the software as an excuse to not fix cybersecurity vulnerabilities. So the two people at the FDA most involved in their cybersecurity efforts spend all of their time dispelling that particular rumor.
Mike, if I may call this incorrectly, but security as a service model for med device companies, are you looking to capture other data coming out of these devices? If you're already in there and you're doing a software as a service eventually that's going to grow, what other data can you be capturing?
Yeah,
just security data.
This is a good question. So here's some things we don't want. We don't want PHI. If there's a cardiologist updating data on a pacemaker, we don't want the patient's name. We don't want the actual settings. What we do want to know is that a given pacemaker has received an update from a device with a serial number X at this time. And just by looking at trends in that data, we can spot a lot of anomalous behavior. What we have found is when we tell medical device vendors about that use case, they say, that's great. Can you also give us an API so we can throw some engineering data in there and you guys can get that and then you can feed that back to us? And we say, of course. So one of our big barriers to entry, sorry to preempt your question, is the data that we're amassing about what these devices are actually doing. And the kind of data that we need to amass is actually relatively innocuous. We don't need PHI. We just need to know when the devices are functioning and what those patterns look like.
Thanks. Can you go a little bit more into the sales process, how you plan on bringing this out? And you have to go talk with these medical device makers. You have to convince them to add this line of code into their software or firmware. I'm not sure which one.
Yep.
But tell me a little bit more about your experiences with that and how that process is going.
Yeah. So when we first sat down to figure out how to best address this problem, we thought we should make some software that can be bolted onto a device after it's been released and sell it to a hospital. We found that that is not the right approach for a bunch of reasons. Number one is hospitals are reluctant to pay for this. They just spent $1 million on a CT scanner. Why should they spend an extra $1 securing the thing? Number two, you're really limited in terms of the behavior. You're really limited in terms of what you can change about the way a device functions after it's been approved without making a new medical device. So we recognize that it's going to be a longer sales cycle to go uphill to the medical device vendors. And if we get Medtronic as a customer on day 0, it's a year before that device actually hits the market. And that's one of our challenges, one of the challenges of our approach. The good thing is, number one, we can actually make significant changes to the way the device functions to make it much more secure by working with the device vendor. And number two, it's really sticky, right? Once our code is in a medical device and it's cleared, it's going to be in there for 10 to 20 years, which is another whole security issue a whole other security issue of how long these devices are out there functioning. So the sales process is harder on a marginal basis selling to device vendors, but the end effect is much better, we think.